I am 92 years old. I have outlived my husband. I have outlived my friends. I have outlived people I once loved deeply and people I once feared. And somewhere along the way, without noticing exactly when it happened, I outlived the version of myself who believed she still had time. I don't mean time in the way people usually mean it, not minutes or years. I mean the kind of time you assume will be there when you're ready. The kind you believe waits patiently while you handle responsibilities. That version of me is gone now. I sit near the window most mornings. The light comes in at an angle that feels familiar. My hands shake more than they used to. My knees ache before the weather changes. But my thoughts, they've become sharper. Clarity is strange that way. It doesn't arrive when it would be useful. It arrives when it's almost too late. I feel close to the edge now. Not frightened, just aware. Aware that there are far fewer days ahead of me than behind. Aware that nothing new is waiting its turn anymore. Aware that this is the moment where you stop pretending there will be another chapter. And before I'm gone, before my name becomes something people say softly, I want to tell the truth about a life that looked fine from the outside. When I was younger, I thought life was something you earned access to, that if you behaved correctly, stayed responsible, didn't make trouble, eventually you'd be allowed to enjoy it. So I waited. I waited to feel secure. I waited to feel confident. I waited until wanting more felt reasonable. I didn't realize waiting was already a choice. I married young, not because it felt like destiny, but because it felt expected. He was a good man in the ways people approve of, steady, reliable, not cruel, not particularly curious either. People liked him. That mattered more to me then than how I felt when I sat alone at night. We built a life that made sense on paper, a house that stayed clean, children who behaved, routines that ran smoothly. I became very good at being useful. I kept track of everything: birthdays, appointments, meals, emotions. I noticed when people were tired before they said it. I learned how to smooth over discomfort, how to anticipate needs before they became problems. I told myself this was love. What I didn't understand was that I was slowly replacing myself with a function. There were parts of me that wanted more texture from life, more honesty, more room to be contradictory, more space to speak without rehearsing first. I told myself those desires were selfish, immature, unnecessary, so I folded them away. I didn't think of it as loss. I thought of it as adulthood. Years passed like that, quietly, efficiently. I don't remember a moment where I decided to disappear. I remember choosing peace over truth so often that truth stopped knocking. People describe me with words that sounded flattering: patient, strong, selfless. They meant it kindly. They didn't see how carefully I edited myself to earn those words, how often I smiled while something inside me tightened, how often I let things go that mattered. I wasn't afraid of being disliked. I was afraid of being difficult. Difficult women weren't rewarded when I was young. They were corrected, dismissed, left alone. So I learned how to be easy. I laughed at jokes that unsettled me. I nodded through conversations that erased me. I accepted praise that didn't fit. I mistook endurance for virtue. By my 40s, I had stopped checking in with myself. By my 50s, I had stopped noticing my own reactions. By my 60s, I believed it was simply too late to change. I told myself stability mattered more than desire, that gratitude should be enough, that wanting more was ungrateful. I stayed married not because I felt deeply known, but because leaving felt irresponsible, because I didn't want to disrupt a life that looked respectable, because I was afraid of being judged, because I didn't know who I would be without the role I had practiced for decades. So I stayed. I stayed while my voice softened. I stayed while my laughter became rare. I stayed while entire versions of myself quietly expired without ceremony. By the time the children were grown, my husband and I lived like strangers sharing a routine. We spoke about groceries, weather, doctor's appointments. We didn't fight much. People admire that. What they don't tell you is that silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's resignation, wearing a polite expression. The idea of divorce didn't arrive dramatically. It crept in slowly, through exhaustion, through the realization that if nothing changed, this was exactly how the rest of my life would feel. I didn't imagine happiness. I imagined honesty. When I finally said the word divorce out loud, it sounded absurd. Who leaves at this age? Who starts over when the body is already slowing down? Friends were concerned. Some were kind. Some were quietly judgmental. I was confused, too. Signing the papers felt strangely ordinary. A desk, a pen, a clerk who didn't know my name. I walked outside afterward and waited for something to happen inside me. Relief? Grief? Fear? What I felt instead was emptiness. That emptiness frightened me more than sadness would have. Living alone for the first time in decades was disorienting. Without anyone to manage, I didn't know how to exist. I had built my identity around being part of something, around being needed. Alone, I felt unfinished. People expect a late-life divorce to be liberating. They imagine reinvention, freedom, bold choices. What came first was mourning, not just for the marriage, but for the woman I never allowed myself to become. I mourned the years I stayed silent, the conversations I avoided, the anger I swallowed because it felt improper. I mourned the fact that I had waited until my energy had dulled to ask what I wanted. That was when the truth finally settled in. The divorce didn't take my life. Staying did. Not because my husband was cruel, not because I was trapped, but because I believed responsibility meant shrinking, because I thought endurance guaranteed meaning, because I believed being good meant being small. No one tells you that you can do everything right and still abandon yourself. After the divorce, I tried to reconnect with parts of myself I had ignored. I bought books I didn't finish. I joined groups where I rarely spoke. Growth at this age doesn't look heroic. It looks hesitant, awkward, lonely. Sometimes regret arrives suddenly, not about leaving, about waiting for permission that never came, waiting for life to feel lighter without asking why it felt heavy, waiting for circumstances to change instead of admitting I needed to. I think about the woman I was at 40, at 50, at 60. I want to tell her that discomfort isn't failure, that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish, that being unhappy quietly doesn't earn a reward. People still ask me if I regret the divorce. I tell them the truth. I regret not listening sooner. I regret confusing longevity with success. I regret teaching my daughters, without words, that endurance mattered more than honesty. If there is wisdom in old age, it's this: time doesn't negotiate. It keeps moving, taking pieces of you, whether you're paying attention or not. Now I speak more honestly, not loudly, but clearly. I notice my own thoughts. I allow myself preferences. I stop apologizing for them. That may not sound like much, but after a lifetime of disappearing, it feels like finally arriving somewhere real. I didn't find happiness late in life. I didn't reinvent myself. I met myself. Late. Unprepared. But honestly. And I only wish I hadn't waited so long to believe I was allowed to live fully. That is what I know now, even if I learned it late.